Stop. Just stop right now, whatever you are doing, and listen. Listen not to me, but to that voice inside your head that has been screaming at you for years. That voice you drown out with noise, endless scrolling, meaningless conversations, cheap dopamine hits that leave you feeling even more hollow. That voice knows what you are too afraid to admit to yourself. That voice knows that you are living far, far below your potential. That voice knows that every night, when you lay your head on the pillow, in those 3 brief seconds before sleep takes you, you are overtaken by a haunting feeling, a quiet terror that whispers, "You are wasting your life. You are letting your mind rot. You are a slave in the costume of a free man. Look at yourself. Not at the version you show the world, not at the filtered photographs, not at the carefully curated words you speak in public. Look at the raw, unwashed, undisciplined reality of your inner existence. How many times today did you check your phone before your feet touched the floor? How many times did you reach for that device like an addict reaching for a needle, desperately waiting for a notification? A like, a comment, some external validation that you exist, that you matter, because deep down you have lost the ability to tell yourself that you matter. You have become a beggar at the door of others' attention. And that, my friend, is the deepest poverty a human soul can experience. Not poverty of the wallet, poverty of will, poverty of a mind that has forgotten how to sit in silence with itself, without running, without escaping, without needing to be anesthetized by entertainment. What happened to you? What happened to that child you once were? The one who could get lost in a book for hours, who could look at the stars and feel awe, who had dreams so big they frightened even him. That child is buried alive under layers of comfort, convenience, and cowardice. You have traded your birthright of inner sovereign greatness for a bowl of lentil stew called convenience. You have traded the difficult, stony, glorious path of discipline for the soft, muddy, shameful swamp of impulse. And the worst part, the most tragic, heart-wrenching part, is that somewhere inside yourself, you know this. You know you are betraying yourself. Every day, every hour, every choice where you choose the easy over the right. This betrayal, this self-inflicted wound that no one sees, is the source of your quiet despair. It is not circumstances that make you unhappy. Not your boss, not your spouse, not the lack of money, not the traumas of the past. It is the gap between who you know you could be and who you choose to be. This gap is an abyss, and you fall into it every morning when you hit snooze, every evening you spend on mindless content, every moment you allow your emotions to hijack your reason and turn you into a screaming, reactive animal. You have been lied to, a beautiful, seductive, poisonous lie. You have been told that you should follow your feelings, that your emotions are your authentic self, that if something feels good, you should do it, and if something feels hard, you should avoid it. This philosophy, this religion of the modern age, has spawned a generation of emotional invalids. People who are shocked and shattered when life demands something of them. People who fall apart at the first sign of discomfort. People with the psychological resilience of wet tissue paper. You feel offended and you lash out. You are bored and you medicate with screens. You are sad and you consume. You are anxious and you avoid. You have become a puppet, and your invisible strings are your own untrained, undisciplined emotions. The Stoic philosopher from 2,000 years ago, a man named Epictetus, born a slave, crippled in body, but a titan of spirit, looked at the human condition and said something so profound, so piercing, so timeless, that if you truly understood it, your life would shatter and be reforged in an instant. He said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the judgments they form about things." Read that again. Let it sink into the marrow of your bones. The event itself, the words spoken to you, the mistake you made, the traffic jam, the rejection you faced, All of it is neutral. It is raw data. It has no power over you. None. Zero. The only power they possess is the power you give them through the story you tell yourself about them. And you, in your undisciplined state, tell yourself catastrophic, victim-soaked, drama-laden stories. You are not just sad about what happened. You tell yourself it's unfair, that this always happens to me, that my life is ruined, that they did this to me. And in that moment, you hand the keys to your inner citadel to the enemy and become a refugee in your own mind. But what if you could stop? What if you could build something so solid within yourself that the storms of life, betrayals, losses, failures, humiliations simply bounced off you? What if you could develop a mind like a mountain, and the events of your life were merely clouds passing by? Some clouds dark and heavy, others light and fleeting, but the mountain remains unshaken, unmoved, silent, mighty. This is not a metaphor. This is not a fantasy. This is a psychological reality practiced, honed, and proven by the greatest men and women who ever lived. From the battlefields of ancient Rome to the prison cells of political dissidents, from the secluded cells of philosophers to the high-pressure boardrooms of modern titans, this one skill, this one art, has been the invisible foundation on which both outer success and inner peace were built. And this art, this science, this sacred discipline is the control of the mind. Not control over the external world, that is the domain of fools. Not control over other people, that is tyranny. But complete, uncompromising, iron control over your own perceptions, your own actions, and your own will. Imagine for a moment, not as a dream, but as a serious, visceral exercise. Imagine what your life would look like if you possessed this. Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning, and before your hand reaches for the phone, you catch yourself. You observe the impulse, you feel the pull, and you smile at it and say, "Not today." And you get up. You go to the bathroom, and instead of dreading the cold, you step under the freezing shower. Feel the shock, the gasping breath, the urge to jump out, and you stand there, breathing, calm, watching as your body screams and your mind remains still. The silent emperor watching the panicking servant. You have just won the first battle of the day. You have just proven to yourself that you are not your impulses. You are the one who observes them. And this tiny victory, this microscopic act of self-control, sends a ripple effect through all the remaining hours. When your colleague says something disrespectful, you feel the heat rise in your chest, the adrenaline, the ancient fight-or-flight response. But you pause, you breathe. You look at that anger like a curious scientist and let it dissolve before it becomes words you cannot take back. You have just won the second battle. When you sit down to do that, deep, hard, creative work that your soul is calling you to do, and the resistance comes, that heavy, seductive voice that says, "Just check one more video, one more message, do it tomorrow." You notice that voice too. You hear it. You acknowledge its existence. And then you open the document anyway. You write the first word, then the second. And the resistance screams and throws a tantrum. But you keep writing. You have just won the third battle. And by the time the sun sets, you have won 100 small battles that no one saw, no one applauded, no one acknowledged. But you know, your soul knows, and for the first time, perhaps in many years, you lay your head on the pillow, and instead of shame, instead of that quiet terror of a wasted day, you feel something ancient and rare. You feel self-respect. You feel the quiet, unshakable dignity of a man who did not betray himself today. This is not about becoming a cold, unfeeling robot. This is not about suppressing your humanity. This is about becoming the master of your humanity, not its victim. This is about reclaiming the throne that has always been yours. The world will tell you this is impossible. The world will tell you that you are beautiful as you are, that your addictions are just self-care, that your emotional outbursts are just you being real, that your lack of discipline is just freedom of spirit. The world will sell you pills, programs, and philosophies that soothe your ego while your house burns down around you. Do not listen to them. They are merchants of comfort, and comfort is the anesthesia before the amputation of your potential. You are here, watching this, reading this, because something inside you, that dying ember of the child you once were, refuses to quietly go into the night. That ember wants to become a fire. That fire wants to become a forge. And in that forge, you will melt down the weak, whining, reactive version of yourself, and from the molten metal, you will forge a new self. A self that does not waver at praise and is not crushed by criticism. A self that does what needs to be done, regardless of whether it has the mood. A self that looks at obstacles and sees fuel. A self that understands, deep in its bones, the profound truth that Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world, wrote to himself in his personal diary, never intended for other eyes. You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The most powerful man in the world, who commanded armies, who held the fate of millions in his hands, knew that the only real power was power over his own inner citadel. And you, with your smartphone addiction and fragile ego, think you will find peace and strength by changing external circumstances. By finding a better job, a more understanding partner, a more respectful society. You are looking in the wrong direction. The war is not outside. The war is here, in the silent space between the event and your reaction. And in that space, in that tiny, sacred, momentous pause, lies all your freedom, all your future, all your salvation, or all your damnation. In the next 30 minutes or so, I am going to take you on a journey. A descent into the depths of your own mind, and then an ascent to the high, cold, clear summit where the air is thin, but the view is eternal. I will tear away the comforting lies and show you the terrifying, liberating truth. I will give you a system, a set of laws, a kind of mental operating system that has been tested in the fire of history, through slavery, exile, war, plague, and personal tragedy. By the time this video ends, you will have no excuses. The path will lie before you, stark and undeniable. It will not be an easy path. In fact, it will be the hardest path you have ever walked. But it will also be the only path that leads anywhere worthwhile. The question is not whether you can achieve iron discipline and control your mind. The only question that will echo in the silence after this screen goes dark, is whether you will. Because you can, you absolutely can. The ability is already inside you, dormant, waiting, like a sword plunged into a stone, waiting for a hand strong enough to pull it free. The hand is yours. The strength must be forged, and the forging begins now, not tomorrow, not when you are ready, now. This very second is the threshold. On one side is the life you have been living, a life of quiet desperation, reactive chaos, and the slow, suffocating death of your potential. On the other side is a life of sovereign greatness, purpose, and unshakable inner peace. A life where you are the cause, not the effect. A life where the world does not act upon you, but you act upon the world, and whatever comes back, you turn into wisdom and strength. You stand at the gate. The gate is open, but no one is going to push you through it. You must choose to walk. You must choose to meet the fire. You must choose to become who you were always meant to be. So I ask you, in this moment of absolute stillness, before we dive into the ancient wisdom that will rewire your very perception of reality, are you ready to reclaim your mind? Are you ready to become the silent emperor of your inner kingdom? Because once you cross this line, once you truly see the mechanics of your own psychology and the levers of control that have always been within reach, you will not be able to unsee it. You will never be able to go back to the comfortable lie of victimhood. The burden of freedom is heavy, but it is the only burden worth carrying. And now we begin. Let us travel back 2,000 years to a stone courtyard in Rome, where a crippled slave is about to teach the world a lesson in power that would make emperors envious. Rome, the second half of the 1st century, an age when marble palaces towered over filthy streets, and the smell of blood from the gladiatorial arenas mingled with the scent of expensive incense from the palaces of the patricians. The empire had reached its zenith, but beneath the gleaming surface seethed a brutal, unforgiving reality. A reality where a man could be a thing, where a human life was worth less than a sack of grain, and where one lame slave with a broken body and an unbreakable spirit was about to overturn the very understanding of freedom and slavery. This slave was named Epictetus, a name that simply meant acquired. He did not even have a true name, just a label, just the brand of ownership. His master was Epictetus, a freedman who had once been a slave himself and now served as the personal secretary to the Emperor Nero, a cruel, capricious, vain man who curried favor with a mad tyrant and took out his own malice on those beneath him. And beneath Epictetus was only his slave. Epictetus, imagine the scene. A wealthy Roman house, an inner courtyard paved with cold stone. Oil lamps cast trembling, uneven shadows on the walls adorned with frescoes. The air is thick, heavy, saturated with the tension that always precedes cruelty. Epictetus is in a rage. Perhaps the Emperor Nero humiliated him today. Perhaps some deal fell through. Perhaps he simply woke up with that dark, itching need to cause pain that lives in the souls of petty tyrants. The reason does not matter. The victim is chosen. Epictetus stands before him. His leg is clamped in some barbaric device, a torture mechanism the Romans used to punish disobedient slaves. Metal clamps, levers, the blunt, inexorable physics of pain. Epictetus leans on the lever, slowly, with sadistic pleasure twisting his slave's leg at an unnatural angle. At this moment, most people, practically all people, would have started screaming, begging, crying, cursing, bargaining with fate. It is natural. It is human. Pain is the most primitive, most ancient signal, one that instantly seizes control of the brain, shutting down everything but the animal instinct for survival. But not Epictetus. Instead of a scream, instead of a plea, a voice comes from his lips, calm, even, almost gentle, as if he were explaining a simple truth to a child. He says to his torturer, "You will break it." Just 3 words, a simple statement of fact, without fear, without hatred, without begging, just a cold, clear observation of reality. Epictetus probably became even angrier. How dare this thing, this talking tool, maintain such dignity under his hand? He pressed harder. The bone cracked, a sound you can never forget, a sound that echoed through the stone courtyard. The leg was broken, mangled. Epictetus would be lame for the rest of his life. And then something incredible happens, something that transforms this story from a merely brutal scene into one of the greatest philosophical moments in the history of Western civilization. In the silence that followed that horrific sound, in the silence filled with pain that must have been pulsing through his entire body, blinding, nauseating pain, Epictetus spoke again. His voice did not waver. His face, though probably contorted with suffering, showed neither defeat nor malice. He looked at his master and said, "Did I not tell you that you would break it?" No cry, no tears, not a single tear, only this supernatural, almost eerie calm. Only this statement of fact, spoken with the quiet, unshakable power of a man who understood something fundamental about the nature of reality. Something that Epictetus, for all his power, for all his connections to the imperial court, for all his ability to mangle bodies, was utterly incapable of understanding. What did Epictetus understand in that moment? What truth did he grasp, sitting on that cold stone, looking at his mangled, forever broken leg? He understood and lived this truth in practice, not just in theory, that there are 2 completely different universes, the universe of the external and the universe of the internal. The external is the body, property, reputation, health, circumstances. All of this is subject to the laws of fate, chance, and the cruel will of others. Epaphroditus had absolute power over Epictetus's external world. He could put him in chains. He could torture him. He could break his bones. He could even kill his body. There was no doubt about that. This was the reality of slavery, the reality of living in a body vulnerable to pain and destruction. Epictetus did not deny this. He did not pretend the leg did not hurt, or that he was enjoying the torture. He fully, completely acknowledged the reality of the physical world and his physical helplessness within it. You will break it. That was an acknowledgement of fact, an acknowledgement of the limits of his power. He could not stop Epaphroditus. He could not miraculously heal his leg. He could not change the external event. But there was another universe, the internal one. And in this universe, Epictetus was the emperor. In this universe which the Stoics called the hegemonikon, the ruling reason, the guiding principle of the soul, there were no chains strong enough, no levers powerful enough. Epaphroditus could destroy his knee, but he could not make him hate. He could not make him scream in terror. He could not make him lose his dignity. He could not make him judge the situation as a broken, panicking man would. Epictetus had a choice. In that microscopic pause between the sensation of pain and his reaction to it, in that sacred space that exists in every person but is so rarely used, he exercised his freedom. He chose the interpretation. He chose the judgment. He chose not to add to the pure, physical sensation of pain, the psychological horror of indignation, self-pity, catastrophizing, and dread. He separated the pain in his leg from the suffering in his soul and discovered that one can exist without the other. The body screamed. The soul was silent. The body was mangled. The soul remained untouched, whole, radiant in its unreachable fortress. There it is. There is the seed from which the entire edifice of Stoic philosophy would grow. Not a theory, not an intellectual game, but a living, bleeding, crystalline demonstration, performed by a broken slave in a Roman courtyard 2,000 years ago. Later, when Epictetus miraculously gained his freedom, became a respected teacher of philosophy, and founded his own school, he would formulate this principle in words that would outlive empires. Men are disturbed not by things, he would tell his students, but by the judgments they form about things. Death is not frightening. Otherwise, it would have appeared frightening to Socrates. The frightening thing is the judgment itself that death is frightening. Therefore, when we are hindered, or disturbed, or grieved, let us never blame anyone but ourselves, that is, our own judgments. The broken leg was a thing. It was painful. It was inconvenient. It forever changed his gait, making him limp for the rest of his days. But it was not a tragedy. It would have been a tragedy only through his judgment, his inner consent to let this event destroy his spirit. And he refused to give that consent. He refused to be broken in the one place that mattered. Think about how radically different this is from everything we are taught today. Modern psychology, modern culture, our entire society tells us that we are products of our environment, our trauma, our childhood, that if something bad happens to us, we inevitably become victims, and our psychological state is a direct, automatic result of external events. We are taught to locate the source of our suffering outside ourselves, in toxic parents, in an unjust boss, in systemic oppression, in a betraying partner, and we become experts at finding blame, experts at cataloging our grievances. And with each new accusation, we drift further and further from the only true source of power. Because power lies not in changing the world, which we can never fully control. Power lies in changing the one thing we can absolutely control. In changing the architecture of our internal judgment. Epictetus in that courtyard, with his leg twisted out of joint, possessed more real power than the Emperor Nero on his golden throne. Because Nero, for all his legions and wealth, was a slave to his passions. his fears, his paranoia, his insatiable need for applause. The slightest criticism sent him into a rage. The slightest threat to his power triggered a wave of murderous terror. He was the emperor of the world, but a beggar in his own mind. Epictetus was a slave to the world, but an emperor in his soul. That is true power, not power over others, power over yourself. But this story does not end merely with this moment of triumph and pain. There is an even deeper layer to it, an even darker and more purifying fire. Why was Epictetus even a slave to Epaphroditus? Why did fate, or God, or providence, or chance, call it what you will, place this diamond of spirit into such a dirty, cruel setting? Later, in his teachings, Epictetus reflected on this. He compared life to military service, to an assignment, to a post. You have been assigned this place, this post, he would say. Your duty is not to complain that you are not a general and not to desert the post entrusted to you. Your duty is to stand guard right here, at this point however difficult it may be, and to do what that position demands. Epictetus did not just accidentally suffer. He viewed his slavery, his lameness, his poverty as a training ground, as an arena specially created to forge his spirit. God, he said, like a wise coach, puts his best athletes against the toughest opponents. Do you not know, he would ask, that life is the Olympic Games? You cannot just sit and watch. You must go out into the arena. You must compete, and your opponents are chosen for you not by chance. They are your opportunity to demonstrate virtue, to demonstrate courage, to demonstrate self-control. If Epictetus had been born a patrician in silks and luxury, would we know his name today? Would he have become a philosopher whose words outlived the fall of Rome, the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, and reached your screen right now? Most likely not. It was precisely this cruel, unjust, ugly environment, a cruel master, a torture rack, a broken leg, that chiseled out of him that crystalline, unshakable wisdom that became a beacon for millions. The obstacle became the way. The enemy, Epaphroditus, unknowingly turned out to be Epictetus's greatest teacher. He gave him not just a lesson in philosophy, he provided him with a laboratory. He created the extreme conditions in which the theory that men are disturbed not by things, but by their judgments, was tested in the cruelest, most real experiment imaginable. And the theory held. The spirit conquered matter. And now, crossing 2,000 years, we stand before the same question, not in theory, in practice, in your life, right now. You do not have a cruel Roman master twisting your leg. Your enemy is more cunning, more subtle, more insidious. Your enemy is the quiet voice in your head that, when the alarm goes off, says, "Just 5 more minutes, you are tired, you deserve rest." It is the impulse pulling you to your phone when you are bored or uncomfortable. It is the wave of anger rising in your chest when someone tells you an unpleasant truth. It is the heavy, leaden feeling of resentment you nurture after a fight with a loved one. These are your modern Epaphrodituses. Small, annoying, ubiquitous. They do not break bones. They do something worse. They paralyze the will. They soften the character. They turn a potential emperor of the soul into a whining, reflexive slave to his own whims and circumstances. And every time you give in to that voice, every time you choose comfort over challenge, reaction over response, resentment over understanding, you allow your inner Epaphroditus to twist your soul. You allow yourself to be broken. Perhaps not the body, but the will, the mind, the spirit. That one thing that is truly you. Epictetus stands in that distant courtyard as an eternal challenge, as a mute, limping, unbreakable question addressed to each of us. If he, a slave in chains, with a bone breaking in a vice, could maintain the calm of an emperor, then what is your excuse? If he could find freedom in shackles, why do you feel imprisoned in your comfortable apartment, with a fridge full of food and all the world's knowledge in your pocket? The scale of your internal battle may seem smaller, but the stakes are exactly the same. The stake is your freedom, your integrity, your humanity. And the answer Epictetus gave that day is not a museum piece. It is a manual for action. It is an invitation to enter that same inner fortress he discovered in the darkest hour of his life. A fortress whose walls are built not of stone, but of clarity of perception. A fortress whose weapon is not a sword, but disciplined judgment. A fortress that awaits you, right now. For the door is always open, but you must enter yourself. And you can do this only by beginning to build, step by step, law by law, that iron discipline of mind, which is the only true freedom. And the first law, the first stone in the foundation of this fortress, sounds like this. Let go of what is not yours. The fortress is within, and it is with this that we begin our journey into the very depths. Let us begin with the hardest, most sobering, and most liberating blow that Stoicism delivers to the modern mind. This blow shatters the illusion of control that is the root of almost all your anxieties. You wake up in the morning, and before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already in a state of war. You think about what your boss will say about your project. You think about whether that person will reply to your message. You think about whether the economy will crash, whether prices will rise, whether it will rain tomorrow, what your relatives will think of you, whether you will stay healthy in 10 years. And so lying in bed, not even having gotten up yet, you are already exhausted. You are already fighting shadows. Epictetus begins his teaching not with motivation. He begins with an anatomy of reality. He draws with a scalpel the most important line in your mental universe, a line that divides everything that exists into two categories. First, what is within our power? Second, what is not within our power? Everything. There is nothing else. This simple, almost absurdly simple dichotomy is the foundation upon which the entire edifice of a disciplined mind is built. What, then, is within our power? Epictetus gives a crystal clear answer. Within our power are our opinions, our aims, our desires, our aversions, our actions. In a word, everything that is the product of our own will, everything that is born within the boundaries of our own reason. What is not within our power? Our body, our property, our reputation, our work, our social standing, and ultimately, our death. In short, everything that is not a product of our own will, everything that comes from outside and is subject to the laws of fate, chance, and the will of others. Now pause for a moment and look at your life through this lens. You will discover a terrifying thing. You will discover that 90% of your mental energy, your emotional fuel, your sleepless nights, your anger, your envy, your fear, is spent on the second category, on things you do not control. You are trying to control the weather, trying to control the opinions of other people about you, trying to control the future, trying to control the behavior of your spouse or your children, trying to make the world revolve around your desires. And when it inevitably refuses to do so, you fall into rage or depression. You behave like a man who has gone out into a stormy sea and is yelling at the waves, commanding them to stop. The waves do not care. They will crash into your face, fill your mouth with salty bitterness, and you will drown, cursing the waves instead of learning to swim. This is madness, and this madness is the default state of the undisciplined mind. The Stoic perspective does not offer you magical control over the external world. It offers you something far more valuable. It offers you an escape from this hopeless war. It says, stop fighting for what does not belong to you. You are not the general of the universe. You are merely a sentry at one small post, and that post is your mind. Once you truly, at the level of intuition and reflex, internalize this distinction, something miraculous happens. Anxiety collapses on its own. Because anxiety is always an attempt to solve a problem that lies beyond your reach. You cannot sleep because you are mentally trying to force another person to apologize to you. But his mouth, his vocal cords, his pride, his mind, these are not within your power. Let them go. You are terrified that your project might fail and you will be fired. The final outcome, the boss's decision, the market's reaction, these are not within your power. What is within your power? To do the work as well as you are able in this moment. To focus on the effort, not the result. The practical application of this law begins with a brutal morning inventory. Every time you feel a pang of anxiety or irritation, you must say out loud, in words, "Is this within my power or not?" If the answer is no, and 99 times out of 100 the answer will be that, your only task is to relax your grip. Unclench your fist, let go. Watch that thought float away like a cloud, without clinging to it. This is not passivity. This is the highest form of activity. It is the redirection of energy from destruction to creation. You cease to be a victim of circumstance and become the architect of your inner world. And now the next question arises. When you have let go of the external and are left alone with yourself, what do you see? You see an event, a naked, raw fact, but immediately your mind pounces on it and begins to paint it in the colors of terror or delight. And it is here that the second law comes into play. The second law, the law of disciplined perception. Events are neutral. The colors are added by you. Are you certain you see reality? Are you certain that the story you tell yourself about what is happening is the truth? The Stoics discovered a radical truth, which today is confirmed by cognitive psychology. Between stimulus and response, there is a gap. An event occurs. Raw, unprocessed, objective. A car cuts you off on the road. Your boss frowns. Your partner does not call back. Money is lost. These are just data. They are zeros and ones of reality. In themselves, they carry no emotional charge. They are not imbued with resentment, fear, or tragedy. They are simply the movement of atoms in space. But then your mind steps in, and instantly, with a speed that seems automatic, it adds a layer of judgment. That car cut me off because its driver is an idiot who doesn't respect me. I have been humiliated. This is unacceptable. I must punish him. And now you are speeding down the highway with a racing heart, ready to risk your life and the lives of others, not because of the fact of a car's maneuver, but because of your interpretation of that maneuver. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from the things themselves, but from our opinions about them. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning that the people he would encounter would act according to their own conceptions of good and evil, and that being offended by them was as foolish as being offended by a thorn for prickling. The modern trap is our deep, intimate attachment to drama. Our ego loves to be offended. It derives a perverse, narcotic pleasure from the feeling of righteous anger. Victimhood has become a currency of social status. The more horrific the story of how you were wronged, the more attention, sympathy, and likes you receive. We have become addicted to outrage. We replay scenarios of revenge and humiliation of our offenders in our heads, and it gives us a false, fleeting sense of power, when in reality we are just draining our psychic energy into a black hole. We attribute malicious intent to chance. We take personally things that have nothing to do with us. The boss's frown becomes proof that we are about to be fired. But maybe he just has a stomachache. Maybe his child is sick. Maybe he is just lost in thought about something heavy. We will never know. But we choose the most painful, most egocentric interpretation because it gives us a sense of significance, even if that significance is negative. Stoic discipline of perception offers a radical alternative. It offers what we might call chastity of mind. Do not enter into a dirty, hasty relationship with the first emotional interpretation that comes along. When an event occurs, you must freeze the frame. You must see it as neutral. My boss raised his eyebrows and lowered the corners of his mouth. That is an objective description. That is all. Full stop. At this moment, you have power. At this moment, in that gap between stimulus and response, lies your human freedom. You can choose to slap a label on this event, label it a disaster, and your day will be ruined. Or you can choose not to attach any label. You can say, this is just a movement of facial muscles. It has nothing to do with me until I decide it does. And you return to your work calm, focused, free. The practical application of this law looks like a trial of your own thoughts. Imagine that every thought that arises in your head must pass through customs. You are a stern border guard. A thought arrives. He humiliated me. You say stop, show your proof. Are you a fact or an interpretation? Is this humiliation an objective reality, like a stone? Or is it your personal fantasy? And in 99 cases out of 100, the thought will not be able to produce a passport. It is just smoke. And when you refuse to inhale that smoke, it disperses. You regain your ability to see reality without the distorting lens of panic and ego. This is true clarity. This is the beginning of invincibility. But even this clarity itself will require certain exercises from you, because there is one thing our pampered modern mind fears more than anything else in the world. It is not pain, it is discomfort. And the next law will teach you to seek it voluntarily. The third law, the law of voluntary discomfort. Play with fire. Break the habit before it breaks you. The human organism has one fundamental, evolutionarily ingrained drive that in ancient times saved our lives, and in the modern world is slowly killing us. It is the drive for homeostasis, for comfort, for equilibrium, for warmth, satiety, and the absence of pain. Our ancestors survived because they sought a drier cave and a fatter piece of meat. This program is built into our biology. But we have created a world in which this instinct no longer serves us. We have created a world of climate control, food delivery in 20 minutes, endless entertainment at our fingertips, and pharmacological crutches for the slightest hint of mental or physical pain. We live in a thermostat, and it has killed our resilience. Look at yourself. You cannot focus on a complex task for more than 10 minutes, because your brain, spoiled by the quick dopamine of social media, perceives any resistance as a threat and screams, demanding easy pleasure. You reach for your phone not because you need it, but because the silence and emptiness of the moment have become unbearable for you. You cannot bear the loneliness of your own thoughts. Seneca, who lived in an era of unimaginable by our standards luxury among the Roman aristocracy, saw this danger. He was one of the richest men in Rome, but he practiced what he called exercises in poverty. Once a month, he would deliberately put on coarse clothing, sleep on the bare ground, eat the cheapest, most tasteless food, and drink only water. He did this not for show. He did it to harden his mind against fear. He told himself, I am training for what the crowd fears, and when real misfortune comes, I will already know that I can bear it.